Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are living out loud the pages of the books that are on our bookshelves. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here with my co-host Sam Powell, and we have been walking through a wonderful book called Atomic Habits. It's a bestseller by James Clear. We'll also have in the show notes a link if you don't have the book yet where you can find access to the book, as well as some free materials that James offers. This has been such an amazing series. I can't believe that we're already up to chapter 17 in this book, which is the last chapter of the main meat and potatoes of this book. It's the last chapter also of the fourth law that is a part of the system that James teaches. And so we're going to be talking today about the power of accountability partnerships and also how to invert these laws. Sam, super excited to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't believe we're at the end of this book. And this is the last chapter of like the meat of this book. Everything after this is like advanced tactics. So I don't know. We ended up here. We've been on this journey a while, but I don't know. It also feels like we really went through this quickly.
It feels really fast. These chapters are super short. So if you haven't read this book, you can get through the book quickly. But remember what we shared in the Coach Wooden episodes is that it's not about reading quickly. It's about diving deeply and drinking deeply from these good books. And so we're hoping that you're getting value from these episodes. If you are, please subscribe and share these episodes with others. And we'd love to hear your feedback. You can always share your feedback with us on our LinkedIn page, School of Thoughts, or even just send us some notes. Scott will have ways for you to connect with us in the show notes as well. This is a really interesting chapter because it's talking about how to make things so unsatisfying in your life that you want to break bad habits. So we've been talking along the way, Sam, about building good habits, and this one is about focusing on breaking the bad ones. So how would you like to start this one off today?
Yeah, so I think I'd love to just contextualize this, right, in the whole grand scheme of things here. So we're in the fourth law, which is about reward, right? Cue, craving, response, reward is how habits are formed. So in the fourth part of this is reward. And so James's way of focusing on reward is to make it satisfying. Well, this is the last chapter of this section. So it's the inversion. It's how to really reinforce this by making things unsatisfying. And the two big things that James talks about in this chapter are having an accountability partner, which I'm definitely excited to talk with you about, Denise, because you and I are each other's accountability partners in some spaces, but we've also utilized accountability partners in the past too. And then the other thing that they talk about is a habit contract, which was a new concept for me in this book, which I really thought was super interesting. So yeah, let's talk about accountability partners. Denise, as this chapter kicked off, what resonated with you?
Oh my gosh, the very first story resonated with me. And we're recording this in October. You're probably listening to this in January, I'm going to guess maybe, but it's almost Halloween time. And so this chapter kicked off with a scary story. And it was really striking to me because it was a story about a person named Roger Fisher who went to Harvard Law School, and he was a pilot in World War II. His career after he was a pilot was to specialize in negotiation and conflict management. And we'll talk about a couple more stories here, I think, today about another show I actually watched on television last night that gave me an interesting take on this chapter. But this guy, Roger, was responsible for working with countries and world leaders on things like peace resolutions and hostage crises and diplomatic compromises. And so there was a threat of nuclear war in the 70s and 80s. And one of the things that Fisher was asked to do was to design some strategy to prevent nuclear war. So to prevent something bad from happening. And so one of the things that he did was come up with a suggestion about how the president would have nuclear codes to be able to nuke the world and destroy it as we know it today. And you think about that. I mean, I think we've all seen maybe movies or television where you might see the president and a guy standing next to him with a briefcase that's handcuffed to him. Well, shoot, it would be pretty easy, probably disgusting, but you could just chop that guy's hand off and break open the case, I guess, if you think about it. But this guy, Fisher, suggested something dramatic, which was put the nuclear codes in a little capsule and then implant that capsule right next to the heart of the volunteer who is chosen to carry around this dramatic result inside of his chest. And then what would happen would be that if the president was ever asked to have to press the nuclear bomb, that the only way he could do it would be to kill a trusted advisor, like stabbing him. Like he would say the trusted advisor would have to carry around a butcher knife, and he would have to literally butcher this guy open, take out the capsule, get the codes, and then press the codes. I mean, you think about this, like, this could be a movie about this.
Extreme.
Extreme. It's totally extreme. And so you can imagine that the government advisors at that time at the White House were like, are you absolutely crazy? The Pentagon said this is a terrible idea, but this is about behavior change. And what Fisher was trying to surmise here was, if you make something so dramatic and so immensely unsatisfying and horrific, you're going to think twice before you decide to do this thing that could cause a destructive result. It's no different, really, than when we're talking about pain as an effective teacher, but we don't think of it as that dramatic. So if you think about losing or gaining weight, if we knew that instantly, if you ate a piece of candy, you were going to gain 10 pounds, you probably wouldn't eat the candy. But you also would think if you instantly could lose weight by eating a salad, you'd probably eat more salad. But life isn't that way. There's nothing so dramatically, immensely unsatisfying that you're maybe willing or unwilling to break a habit.
Yeah. And that's the point of this really extreme story at the beginning here, is that when consequences are extremely severe, people learn very quickly, right? Like it's like touching a hot stove. It is instantly severe. You instantly burn your hands. And so you learn after one go, don't touch a hot stove, right? Like you learn instantly when and when not to have certain behaviors if the consequence for that behavior is extremely severe. And so that's really what James is kind of encouraging us to lean into here, is really figuring out, like, increasing the speed and severity of a punishment for either not behaving in a way that you want to or behaving in a way you don't want to, right? So that's, we're thinking, when we're talking about habits, we're talking about what are those things that you're trying to do. And so this is, if you're really trying to, we've talked about making it satisfying. This is, what's that, the inversion of that, that's going to make you go, oh, no, thank you. I'm not doing that. Like, that's not happening. And where James leads us is getting somebody who knows what that punishment is and holds you accountable to it. Right. So like, say you wanted to, I don't know, go to the gym every day, right? That's an easy one. If you wanted to go to the gym every day, then you would come up with a punishment that was really severe for you. So maybe, like, I don't know, for me, I'm a huge reader. Like, I would not be able to read at all today if I didn't go to the gym. For me, that's super severe. I'd be like getting antsy because I like can't pick up my Kindle and read a book. Like, what will I do with my time? But if I had somebody who knew that, right, and I have to call them before I can, pick up the phone, or they call me and they're like, Sam, did you go to the gym today? Nope. Well, then I turned your Kindle off, right? Like I do this with my son. I control his tablet via my phone of like, hey, if your homework's not done, your YouTube doesn't turn on or whatever, right? Like you don't get your allotted time today because whatever. So it reinforces and it brings somebody else into the equation with you.
Well, you think about it from a work perspective, we're all familiar with having a mentor and a manager, and yet it's still sort of new to think about having a coach and having an accountability partner, right? These are still sort of on the front end of the way the best companies are incorporating ways for people to get better results and outcomes by the way that they act, react, respond, and work, and how they can change their thinking. I think back to there was a program that you and I were a part of at that particular time. I was inventing and delivering the program, and you were a participant in the program. This was years ago. And one of the elements of that leadership development program was accountability partnership. And it was also based on taking someone not through a workshop, not through a 2-hour event, not through a one and done and suddenly you're a better leader, but accountability over a period of 1 year's time. And I'd be curious to hear from your perspective, Sam, on the participant side. What was it like for you going through something like that compared to things that you had done perhaps in the past, where accountability partnerships, coaching, and maybe this tethering to a group of people over a longer period of time? How different was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key to ending procrastination, right? Like you're procrastinating because you don't want to do something, right? There's some mental blocker you've got to doing the task. One of the easiest ways to mentally unblock yourself is to know somebody's going to call you out on it. If you don't do it, right? I'm going to show up to school and not have my homework done. I'm going to show up to this meeting and not have the presentation done. Like, guess what? I'm doing that. I'm doing that activity. I'm doing that thing. And so it's a huge driver, and it's an easy lever to pull. And we forget about that all the time, and we don't think about it. We think about it on all the external forces, but this is really that encouraging you to leverage that on the internal forces, right? Like, I want to do this. I want to become this person, right? I've got this identity that I'm building towards with all of these little behavior changes. Now I'm going to take it a whole step further. I'm going to bring somebody into this journey with me, and I'm going to talk to them every day, every week, whatever it is. And knowing that makes you do the thing, right? Like me meeting with, accountability partners I've had in the past in that program and other things. It's like, oh no, I have this meeting with Denise today. And it's like, if I don't have that done, then, that's bad. The same thing has helped me with coaches, with therapists, with, any mentors, right? It's that meeting on the calendar that drives you to take action sometimes, even like when you're, like motivation waxes and wanes internally based on a million things. And so having that external force can help you push through that motivation waning, because you know that there's somebody there saying, hey, you said last week you were going to do X, Y, Z. How'd that go? You go, oh, I didn't do it. And it's like, well, now they're disappointed in me, and now I'm disappointed in myself. And like, that is very unsatisfying of a feeling, to feel like you've disappointed somebody who is helping you, right? Who is here for you, who is cheering you on. It's like, oh, I hate that feeling. So therefore, I'm going to go take this action before I talk to Denise, because I don't want Denise to be like, Sam, you didn't do what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. Isn't this funny, though, the way that you're describing it? Like, I never want to disappoint my parents. So I purposefully do good things to not disappoint them. But isn't it funny that we put others in front of ourselves? Meaning, why wouldn't I just say, I don't want to do that thing because it would disappoint myself? And so having an accountability partner sometimes just helps you drive these habits that you're trying to make good. But one of the things the book talks about is remembering this chapter is not about somebody saying, way to go, you did a good job. It's that person saying, you didn't meet the mark. Now, what is the consequence? And so I think one interesting thing that I'd like to think about and maybe take accountability on after today, as we start to wind down this book, is that you and I started months ago now with the podcast, where we actually make an unofficial contract with one another on the accountabilities we're going to take from week to week, but it's never been tied to negative, unsatisfying consequences. It's just been like, hey, I think by next week, I'm going to try to do this thing. But we never really have said, well, if you didn't do it, how are you going to make sure that you don't not do it again? And so it really struck me in the book where he's talking about this one story where a guy was wanting to be on a diet and get healthy. And so the accountability was, okay, I'm going to get on a strict diet. I'm going to write down all my food. I'm going to exercise. But he coupled that with this thing that this habit tracker, which was a habit contract of sorts, that said, if I don't eat healthy food, or if I don't finish my exercise, or if I don't do whatever it was driving you closer to the success you wanted, then I will do this other thing that will sort of, like, I guess, punish me. Remember when you taught a couple weeks ago, Sam, about habit stacking, which was, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. And this same thing is, okay, if I don't do this, then I am going to do this other thing so that I don't not do that thing again.
Yeah, exactly. And this is getting to that level of specificity. This is the part of this chapter where we move into the contract part of it, like the behavior, the habit contract is what James calls it. But it basically is getting down to, right, I am going to do this thing at this time, after this thing, in this specific way. And if I do not, then this is what happens, right? Like, as you can see, the arc of this whole book, we're really building on the pieces that reinforce and get us really specific, right? This reminds me of goal setting. I push people so hard at the beginning of goal setting to get ultra specific. Like, I always say, like, the results should be so clear that if you tripped on them, you'd know it. Like, it's that, like, when you trip on it, it's so clear that, you know, it was a giant rock here that was gray and it hurt, right? It was that kind of thing. So that's what you're really doing with this contract, is you're getting so ultra specific on, I'm going to be working out every Wednesday at 8 o'clock after I drop my kids off at school. And if I do not, I owe my trainer $200 or whatever. Like, that's the example he uses here, right? Like, I owe this person money. Like, it's painful. I don't want to owe somebody, I don't want to pay the person I'm paying to train me more money on top of it, right? It's instantly painful. And I have it written down very specifically. And so it's, what is that punishment for you to get to that level of specificity? And, right, think about it like a legal contract, right? When you read contracts, they have every little detail spelled out of exactly how this is going to happen and what happens if it doesn't happen. And that's really what you're doing to hold yourself to that level of accountability. Specificity helps us take action and helps us stay accountable to it.
Well, there was this one story in the book that I thought was really interesting, because you have to decide how much pain is in the gain. So this one guy in this book was talking about how he wanted to wake up really early in the morning at, like, before 6 a.m., which is hard. I'm not a morning person, so I think this one would sort of be hard for me as well. But this guy was an entrepreneur. He wanted to wake up early. And so if he didn't wake up at this particular time, he was an accountability partner to himself, or he was using AI. He was using technology to be his accountability partner. He would send an automatic tweet to himself that actually went out to, like, everybody, not just a text message to himself. It was a tweet, and it would go out and say, well, it's whatever time after the time he really wanted to wake up, and I'm not up because I'm lazy. Reply to this for $5 via PayPal, limit 5, assuming my alarm didn't malfunction. So what he did was not just pay himself. He sent out this tweet to his friends saying, I'm lazy, I didn't get up. If you're one of the first 5 people that reply to this and you are awake, I'm going to pay you each $5, $10, $15, $20, $25 each time I don't wake up early. So I'd be curious to know the end of the story for this guy, about how much money did he lose, or when did he finally start waking up early, and if he was waking up early just to avoid the pain of paying people, or if he was waking up early and actually becoming productive.
Yeah. I mean, I like that. That's so interesting. And it reminds me of an episode of The Office where they were trying to reduce mistakes. And so they put in this, like, automated program, and they kept calling it a doomsday device. But it was like, for every mistake they made, like, if they made so many, it was going to email, I think it was the CEO, thinking something terrible that, you know, like, obviously, like, nobody wanted to do. And so this whole episode was about them, like, trying to reduce mistakes. And of course they didn't. So then they were afraid, like, by the end of the day, it was going to send this ridiculous email, like, hilarious. But, like, if that's what we're talking about here, is these, like, accountability levers, whether it's a person or technology or something that's, you know, that's going to do that. And it's got to be immediately unsatisfying for you, right? Like, can you imagine a tweet going out that's like, I was lazy, to, like, I don't know how many followers you have, plus you have to spend money. Like, that's embarrassing. And like, right, you've now got your whole social media following as your accountability partners. Like
Yes.
that would motivate me to get out of bed, because I sure don't want people knowing I didn't get out of bed this morning. Like, dang. So
Yes.
it's,
Oh my
it's that
gosh.
level of kind of contract with yourself, with the world, with somebody.
Yes.
That's written down, very specific. The punishment is clearly laid out. And that punishment, and then the other thing too, right, you've got to think about is that punishment has to match whatever. It's like, oh, if I'm going to give $5, but $5 doesn't mean much to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
then that's not going to work. You need something that is painful. Again, like immediately painful for you personally. So you got to think about, if you want an identity bad enough, and you've got these behaviors that are going to get you there, you have to want it bad enough that you're going to put a punishment that's going to hurt you
Yes.
in to really like up the stakes for yourself.
I have an example of this from just last night, and it's about having a contract with an actual person. So I was watching this kind of 5-part, I think it was, maybe it was more than 5. I was binge watching something on Apple TV of a show called Blackbird. And in this story, without giving all the spoilers in case you have Apple TV and want to check it out, it's basically the story of this, based on a real story, of a guy who was in a minimum security prison for arms dealing and drug dealing. And he was kind of just like a kid who was maybe a high school jock. His dad was a cop. And so he was just in and out of trouble. And so he ended up going to prison. And so, but he was super charismatic. Everybody loved him. No matter where he was, he made friends, even with bad guys, with the wardens, with the guards. And he was just somebody who everybody wanted to be around. But he would continuously get out of prison because he was charismatic and then do something bad and go back to jail. And so the FBI ends up seeing the characteristics and of this guy, where that he was continuously building bad habits and continuously going back to jail and getting out of jail and finding his way to wiggle out because it was easy to get out of jail for him. So they decided to create a contract with him to send him, in exchange for 10 years of prison, to send him to a maximum security psychotic place where there were really, really mentally ill prisoners. And he was going to have to befriend a serial killer to try to find out where these dead bodies were. Well, needless to say, this contract that he made with the FBI had to be private. So he literally got the contract, was told you can never tell anybody. But if you need like a safety, okay, you can dial 612-5711. Why do I even remember that number? Because it was so dramatic in this show that it scared me if this guy wasn't going to remember the phone number last night, that I kept thinking to myself, please remember this phone number, because something is going to happen in this show where you're going to need that out for this contract for you to keep your life and keep your safety. So anyways, as it turns out, later on in the show, he needed that phone number. And I won't tell you why or what happens when he needs the phone number, but suffice to say that this contract that he had was so severe that if he hadn't found out where the dead bodies were, then the cops told him, you likely will stay in that prison for your 10-year sentence with all these mentally ill people. You will likely end up being in prison for far longer because of the charges on your account, I guess, and you could potentially be killed while you're there. And so he had to make this decision of, was it easier to stay in the regular prison and come in and out and do bad things? Or was it harder but more rewarding to go to this crazy place and know that the contract was that you could get freedom for life if you just did this other thing? He ended up deciding to sign the contract, and then the rest of the movie becomes what it becomes. But that was another one where it had to be so unsatisfying to stay where he was that he was willing to do something so extreme just to get out of the situation that he was in. So Sam, as we kind of wrap up some of these thoughts on making things invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying, how do we take our readers to the end of the story before we will still have a couple more episodes, by the way. So it's not the end of the book. It's just the end of all the 4 laws.
Yeah. So I think that, right, like if we're recapping the fourth law, right, it's make it satisfying. So use reinforcement, make doing nothing enjoyable, right? Like making it fun, using a habit tracker, don't miss twice. And then the inverse of that, right? Make it unsatisfying, get that accountability partner, create a habit contract. And I know like for, one of the things that we're holding each other accountable for is reading this book and deep diving in this book and having the stories and, going through this. And so we meet every week, we record episodes, right? And like I have to show up and have things read, and so do you, and things like that. But, as we're kind of wrapping up the meat of this book, I would encourage, everyone to go buy the book, read it for yourselves, because as James describes this is an operating manual. And as I've read this once, I review it with you every week, and then we talk about it, and then I listen to it again, right? That reiteration of this and the deep driving, the drinking deeply from this is what is changing my life and turning me into the person and the identity that I really, really want to become. So I would encourage everyone, right, as we've gone through making it obvious, making it attractive, making it easy, making it satisfying, now that we're wrapping this up, and we'll have an episode or two after this to wrap up some of the extra things in the back. I mean, we don't cover everything by any stretch of the imagination. And you going back and having this operating manual in your hands will change your life if you go in and you apply it the way that we're doing. So, if there's a way I could wrap it up, that's the encouragement I would give everybody.
Such good advice. So if you've been listening to us for any period of time, then you know that we are not teaching directly out of this book. We're sharing real life stories and examples of how these pages are coming to life in our own lives. And the same can be said for you. So take another step. Take what you read in the book, take what you're hearing us share from our own lives, and see how it impacts your life as well. Next time, we're going to be talking about advanced tactics, which is how do you go from being merely good at all this stuff to becoming truly great at building great atomic habits. And as James says in the title of the book, these are tiny changes that can have remarkable results. So thanks again for joining us today, friends. On behalf of my friend Sam Powell, my name is Denise Russo. This has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.